Om Namo Bhagavate Shiramanaya. Prostrations to Bhagavan, shining as the Self in all beings. We start this satsang with a prayer by Srimati Sapna Ganesh, followed by Muktaka trayam by Sri Nandakumarji.
दक्षिणामूर्तिसारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमां रमणाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये आङ्गिकं भुवनं यस्य वाचिकं सर्ववाङ्मयम् आहार्यं चन्द्रतारादि तं नमः सात्विकं शिवम् ॐ नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय. Namo Ramana to everyone.
एकं अक्षरं हृदि निरन्तरं भासते स्वयं लिख्यते कथम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् अहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति. हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवतु. देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्ततभावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भावतः कोऽहं भावयुत कुतो वरधिया दृष्टात्मनिष्टात्मना सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयम्. शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं। नमो नमः।
Namo Ramana. We will now have the chanting of Upadesa Saram by Kumari Uma Shripati and Srimati Ashwini Balaji.
नमो रमण। कर्तुराज्ञया प्राप्यते फलम् कर्म किं परं कर्म तज्जडम् कृतिमहो दधौ पतनकारणम् फलमशाश्वतं गतिनिरोधकम् ईश्वरार्पितं नेच्छया कृतं चित्तशोधकं मुक्तिसाधकं कायवाङ्मना कार्यमुत्तमं पूजनं जपश्चिन्तनं क्रमात् जगतैषधी युक्तसेवनम् अष्टमूर्तिभृदेवपूजनम् उत्तमस्तवादुच्चमन्दत चित्तजं जप ध्यानमुत्तमम् आज्यधारया स्रोतसा समम् सरलचिन्तनं विरलतः परम् वेदभावनात् सोऽहमित्यसौ भावना विदा पावनी मता भावशून्य सद्भावसुस्थिति भावना बलात् भक्तिरुत्तमा हृत्स्थले मना स्वस्थता क्रिया भक्तियोगबोधश्च निश्चितम्। नमो रमण।
Namo Ramana. We will now have the presentations of Ramananjali music by first one by Srimati Radha with Vallabh, the second one by Savitri Krishnan and Jaisriram Krishnan, and the last one by Kumari Revathi Sankar.
Namo Ramana to all. My humble salutations to Srimati Sulochana Natarajan, whose Jayanti was celebrated on the 4th of November. In the remembrance of her, each and every Ramananjali Sangeetam is dedicated to her. It is very much well known, being the leader of Ramananjali. So today, for her dedication, I have taken this song. This is by Shuddhananda Bharti, and the music is by L. Krishnan. இதய குகையே இருப்பிடமாக உதய கதிர் போல் உலகெல்லாம் ஒளிரும் இதய குகையே இருப்பிடமாக உதய கதிர் போல் உலகெல்லாம் ஒளிரும் அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா 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 பேச்சிலும் ரமணன் மூச்சிலும் ரமணன் நினைப்பதும் ரமணன் நெஞ்சினில் ரமணன் பேச்சிலும் ரமணன் மூச்சிலும் ரமணன் நினைப்பதும் ரமணன் நெஞ்சினில் ரமணன் மனதிலே ரமணன் அனைத்திலும் ரமணன் மனதிலே ரமணன் அனைத்து ரமணன் அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா 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 கற்பது ரமணன் நிற்பது ரமணன் இருப்பது ரமணன் குசிப்பது ரமணன் கற்பது ரமணன் நிற்பது ரமணன் இருப்பது ரமணன் குசிப்பது ரமணன் உடுப்பது ரமணன் நடப்பது ரமணன் படுப்பது ரமணன் விழிப்பது ரமணன் உடுப்பது ரமணன் நடப்பது ரமணன் படுப்பது ரமணன் விழிப்பது ரமணன் அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா 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 மந்திரம் அணி மருந்தெந்திரம் அவனே சிந்தையும் அவனே செய்கையும் அவனே மந்திரம் அணி மருந்தெந்திரம் அவனே சிந்தையும் அவனே செய்கையும் அவனே அவனவளது நீ நான் என உலவும் அவனியும் அவனே ஆருயிர் சிவனே அவனவளது நீ நான் என உலவும் அவனியும் அவனே ஆருயிர் சிவனே அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா அறிவே அருளே அன்பே ரமணா 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 ரமணா
நரகுடனானா நரகுலகாடும் நரகனெங்கென்று ஞானதிகிரியார் நரகனை கொன்றவன் நாரணன் நன்றே நரக சதுர்தசி நற்றினமாமே நரகுடனானா நரகுலகாடும் நரகனெங்கென்று ஞானதிகிரியார் நரகனை கொன்றவன் நாரணன் நன்றே நரக சதுர்தசி நற்றினமாமே நரக உருவாய் நடலை குடல கிரகமகமெனவே கெட்ட நரகனாம் நரக உருவாய் நடலை குடல கிரகமகமெனவே கெட்ட நரகனாம் மாபாவியை நாடி மாய்த்து தானாய் ஒளிர்தல் தீபாவளியாம் தேடி மாபாவியை நாடி மாய்த்து தானாய் ஒளிர்தல் தீபாவளியாம் தேடி தானாய் ஒளிர்தல் தீபாவளியாம் தேடி தானாய் ஒளிர்தல் தீபாவளியாம் தேடி.
That was a song on Deepavali composed by Bhagavan Ramana. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. We are meditating on Ramana Suprabhata by Shantananda Puri Swami. We are on the 10th verse of Ramana Suprabhatam. कोऽहं विचारनिरतः प्रथमं भवत्वं नाहं शरीरमिति निश्चितबुद्धियुक्तः सोऽहं प्रबोधसि ते चरणारुरक्तान् आनन्दचित्रमणभो तव सुप्रभातम् कोऽहं विचारनिरतः प्रथमं भवत्वम् नाहं शरीरमिति निश्चितबुद्धियुक्तः सोऽहं प्रबोधयसि ते चरणानुरक्तान् आनन्दचित्रमणभो तव सुप्रभातम्. Good morning, O Ramana, the supreme consciousness bliss. You awaken your devotees to the truth, I am that. By insisting, you first engage yourself in self-enquiry, who am I? And get firmly convinced that you are not the body. If you ask, what is the teaching of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi? In 2 words, we can say that it is to know yourself. Bhagavan says, know yourself. How do we know ourselves? By inquiring into the nature of the self. Whenever a thought arises, question to whom is this thought? And when you question so, you get an answer saying, this thought is for me. Again, ask the question, who am I? This question takes us within and helps us to know ourselves. Bhagavan reveals us the truth that we are not the body. We are beyond the body, mind. We are the unlimited self which is shining always within our heart as I. I present you a song by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi himself. This is a Kannada translation by Dr. N.S. Lakshminarayana Bhatta, music by H.K. Narayana. ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯಿಂದ ತಿಳಿಯ ಬರುವ ಜನರೇ ವಿರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯಿಂದ ತಿಳಿಯ ಬರುವ ಜನರೇ ವಿರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮವು ಅತಿ ದುರ್ಬಲನಿಗೂ ಸತ್ಯವಾದುದೋ ನೋಡೆ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿಯ ನೆಲ್ಲಿಕಾಯ ಮಿಥ್ಯವಾದುದೋ ಆತ್ಮವು ಅತಿ ದುರ್ಬಲನಿಗೂ ಸತ್ಯವಾದುದೋ ನೋಡೆ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿಯ ನೆಲ್ಲಿಕಾಯ ಮಿಥ್ಯವಾದುದೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯಿಂದ ತಿಳಿಯ ಬರುವ ಜನರೇ ವಿರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮ ಒಂದೇ ಶಕ್ತ ಅದೇ ಸತ್ಯ ನೂತನ ಈ ದೇಹ ಲೋಕ ಅದರಿಂದಲೇ ಬಂದ ವಿಭ್ರಮ ಆತ್ಮ ಒಂದೇ ಶಕ್ತ ಅದೇ ಸತ್ಯ ನೂತನ ಈ ದೇಹ ಲೋಕ ಅದರಿಂದಲೇ ಬಂದ ವಿಭ್ರಮ ಭ್ರಮೆಯ ತೆರೆಯು ಕಳಚಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕರಗಿದ ಘಳಿಗೆ ಭ್ರಮೆಯ ತೆರೆಯು ಕಳಚಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕರಗಿದ ಘಳಿಗೆ ಆತ್ಮ ಸೂರ್ಯ ಬೆಳಗುವನೋ ಹೃದಯದ ಒಳಗೆ ಆತ್ಮ ಸೂರ್ಯ ಬೆಳಗುವನೋ ಹೃದಯದ ಒಳಗೆ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯಿಂದ ತಿಳಿಯ ಬರುವ ಜನರೇ ವಿರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ನಾನೇ ದೇಹ ಎನ್ನುವ ತಪ್ಪು ಸೂತ್ರವ ಹಿಡಿದು ಎನಿತೋ ಭಾವ ಜನಿಸಿಹವೋ ಅವುಗಳ ತಡೆದು ನಾನೇ ದೇಹ ಎನ್ನುವ ತಪ್ಪು ಸೂತ್ರವ ಹಿಡಿದು ಎನಿತೋ ಭಾವ ಜನಿಸಿಹವೋ ಅವುಗಳ ತಡೆದು ನಾನು ಯಾರು ಎನ್ನುವ ಶೋಧನೆ ನಾನು ಯಾರು ಎನ್ನುವ ಶೋಧನೆ ನಡೆಯ ಸದಾ ಮೂಡಿ ಬರುವ ಆತ್ಮ ಸೂರ್ಯನೇ ನಡೆಯ ಸದಾ ಮೂಡಿ ಬರುವ ಆತ್ಮ ಸೂರ್ಯನೇ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಶ್ರದ್ಧೆಯಿಂದ ತಿಳಿಯ ಬರುವ ಜನರೇ ವಿರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ ಆತ್ಮಜ್ಞಾನ ಎನಿತೋ ಸುಲಭ ಏನು ಸರಳವೋ. Namo Ramana. We will continue the satsang with a reading and sharing of a text of produced by Ramana Maharshi Center for Learning by Sri Nandakumarji.
In this the book reading segment of our satsang, we continue our readings from Forever is in the Now, the timeless message of Sri Ramana Maharshi, edited and compiled by our founder president Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. We are going to embark on the reading of a few articles by our founder president himself. Ramana Way, Reflections 1. Sri A.R. Natarajan ji. Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi taught and transformed mostly through his potent silence. But then it was not possible for all to sit at his feet when he was in the body, nor can everyone invoke his presence now. The written word is therefore necessary if his message is to be available always as a constant guide. Fortunately, Ramana's sacred words have been fully preserved. This is miraculous if one considers the fact that his spiritual ministration was spread over 50 years. His first advice was in 1898 in reply to his mother's emotional appeal to him to return home. This was written, the first Upadesa was written on a stray slip of paper, but it is still available. Then we have his counsel to Gambiram Seshayar and Sivaprakasham Pillai, contained in Self-enquiry and Who Am I, respectively. This was in 1901 and 1902. The questions and Ramana's replies were written either on sand or a slate. Then came the conversation he had in 1911 with Humphreys, the first Western seeker. This too was recorded in a contemporary magazine, the International Psychic Gazette. Ramana Gita, a record of the conversations which Ganapati Muni and 7 other earnest seekers had with Ramana between 1913 and 1917, followed. In the 20s, Narasimha Swami, his first biographer, elicited answers to a series of questions on matters of vital spiritual interest. Ramana's talks in the 30s were duly recorded by Munagala Venkatramaya to become a milestone in spiritual literature. The 40s were covered by records and diaries maintained by Devraj Mudaliar. Day by day, Surinagama's letters, Subramaya reminiscences, and Kohan Guru Ramana. To add to it, there is Paul Brunton's Search in Secret India, covering the period from 1923 to 1950. We also have the authentic record of the teachings set out by Sri Muruganar in the garland of Guru's sayings, Guru Achakakkove. It is difficult to recall a parallel. The great advantage of this is that there is no ambiguity whatsoever about Ramana's teachings. One might ask, what is the Ramana way? Happiness is inherent and natural to us, says Ramana. Our sahaja or natural state is the fullness of consciousness and of bliss. Since this is our own, all that we have to do is to be aware of it, to discover it ourselves. Therefore, the paramount duty of those whose sights are set on the highest is to inquire, to search, to quest, to know the state of inherent happiness within and abide in it. For this, one should have the firm conviction that what matters is self-knowledge. Ramana asks of what use it is to know anything else while being ignorant about one's true nature. Granted this desire to know the truth about oneself, the first step would be to ascertain and remove the obstructions to being self-aware. The obstruction is the ceaseless movement of thought, the endless flitting from one thought to another according to the momentum of desires. How can quiescence be achieved? Ramana points out that there are two ways. One is the time-honored way of using breath regulation for controlling the mind. Then, like a bird in a net or a tethered animal, the mind would be kept quiet forcibly. But this method produces only manolaya or a temporary lulling of the mind. The turbulence of the mind is only held in leash, and thoughts would gush forth once control is slackened or given up. Other methods like chanting and repeating of the sacred syllables purify the mind and make it possible to turn inward. These practices are valuable, but are only temporary aids to quieten the mind. According to Ramana, the real solution lies elsewhere, in understanding the nature of the mind. In Ramana's straight path, one must question persistently, with keen intellect, what the mind is. Such questioning would reveal that what we call the mind is only a bundle of thoughts. These thoughts are disparate and have no life unless linked to the individual, the I thought. This is a nice way of putting the nature of the mind. I'll read that sentence again. These thoughts are disparate but have no life unless linked to the individual, the I thought. The I thought is seen to be the core of the mind, for all the thoughts are my thoughts. They are dependent on the integral I thought. Other thoughts become alive only when associated with it. It can therefore be said that the I thought is the mind. The mind, the I thought, the ego are all interchangeable expressions. Inquiring deeply, one finds that the mind is only a phenomenon of the waking state. In dream, the identity may be different. The king may dream that he is a beggar, and so on. Thoughts are absent in sleep. In this sense, the mind has birth each day on waking and a daily death when sleep overtakes. Logically, one must find out where from it originates and subsides. The search for the source of the mind must necessarily follow. What is the source of the mind? On the basis of his experience, Ramana indicates it to be the spiritual heart on the right side of the chest. He explains that it is different from the physiological heart on the left and states categorically that it is consciousness in all its fullness. The heart and the mind are linked with each other in the same way as the sun and the moon. Just as the moon reflects only the sun's light, the mind reflects only the consciousness of the heart. Just as the moon reflects only the sun's light, the mind reflects only the consciousness of the heart. The spurana or incessant flash of the heart is continuous and without a break. The spurana or the incessant flash of the heart is continuous and without a break. This is in contrast to the consciousness of mind functioning only during the waking state. Therefore, The true import of individuality or the I can only be the heart. One becomes aware of this by inquiring into the source of the mind and merging the mind in the source. Borrowing a picturesque expression, then we would be bidding goodbye to I and saying hello to I. Limited existence would give place to fullness of existence. This state is described as waking sleep, for the characteristics of both, meaning waking and sleep, would be present. The repose of sleep and consciousness of waking. Then a vibrant silence reigns. I'll read that portion again. Borrowing a picturesque expression, then we would be bidding goodbye. When the mind is merged into the source, we would be bidding goodbye to I and saying hello to I. Limited existence would give place to fullness of existence. This state is described as waking sleep, for the characteristics of both would be present. The repose of sleep and the consciousness of waking. Then a vibrant silence reigns. By what effort can one achieve the conscious merging of the I, that means the mind, in the heart? For this, Ramana recommends self-enquiry as the infallible means. As the term itself suggests, the focus of attention is on the self or the I. It may be again noted that the approach is different from general philosophic thought which concerns itself with God, Brahman, Atman. Ramana shifts attention to the familiar, to the individual, to the I, to the center of one's world. Know the I, then everything will be known, he would say. The tools for conducting self-enquiry are the questions, who am I and whence am I? They are said to be the invincible weapons of the Ramana path. It must, however, be made clear that these are not really questions, though they are couched in that form. No answer is to be sought because any answer would be within the framework of the mind again. The purpose of the question is to create an attitude of doubt, to kindle the spirit of enquiry as to our true identity. The purpose of the question, who am I or whence am I, is to create an attitude of doubt, to kindle the spirit of enquiry as to our true identity. One should enquire to find out what is the true dimension of the I. Are we only that which we habitually think we are? Are we the body, the name and form with which we identify ourselves? In this search, the two questions, who am I and whence am I, help in pinpointing the attention on the I most effectively. Why? For the mind is then held by the scruff before conceptualization, before association with a variety of thoughts. Before the mind can go into conceptualization or run away with a variety of thoughts, it is held by the scruff of the neck, says Shri Natarajanji. Like many animals, when we carry them, for them to be carried without them dropping off, one would hold them by the scruff of the neck. When who am I or whence am I is held, the mind is held by its scruff of the neck and taken to the source. Why? For the mind is then held by the scruff before conceptualization, before association with a variety of thoughts. When the externalization is thus prevented, the mind turns inward and becomes quiet. But this quietness is not to be mistaken for the silence of the self, for it is also for me. I am quiet. So the questioning has to continue. For whom is this quietness? For me. Who am I? As the mind turns inward to its source, it is pulled within by the magnetism of the heart. As the mind turns inward towards its source, it is pulled within by the magnetism of the heart. The mind is then anchored in the source, and only the bliss of the fullness remains. The question would arise, as to how one would be able to act thereafter. To the extent necessary for the action in a given situation, thoughts would arise and they would subside after the action is over without leaving any residual memory. Action would be perfect because the mind would be freed of all attachments and action performed without preference or prejudice. Then there would be no difference between meditation and action. No conflict between work and wisdom. The meditative mood would be a constant undercurrent. Life would be unhurried and recollected, as one's attention would always be fixed on the heart. This is one of the favorite statements of Sir as a support for sadhana. That sadhana, when one is in sadhana avastha, one should live life unhurriedly and recollectedly. Unhurriedly perform the tasks and always recollectedly do them. The emphasis throughout in Ramana's method is on practice and experience. Ramana points out that even the critical study of hundreds of scriptures can only provide vicarious knowledge. Vicarious knowledge means somebody else's knowledge, somebody else's experience, we just read. There is no substitute for one's own direct experience. It is only then that all doubts cease. In Ramana's works, the emphasis on experience is a common thread. Somehow, one must reach the heart and experience the state which is naturally one's own. Even during the practice, the results of self-enquiry would be evident in the peace of mind and the power to deal with troubles, in power all around, but always unconscious power. As one advances in the path, one would begin to enjoy deeper beatitude, whether he is active or in solitude. The jungle hermitage or the London flat would make no difference, for one's attitude to people, things, and events would have changed. The mental equipoise would remain unruffled under all circumstances. That is the first article. We go on reading with this essence of Bhagavan's teachings, captured so beautifully by Sri A.R. Natarajanji in the Ramana Way, Reflections 2 by Sri A.R. Natarajanji. The sacred words of Ramana are timeless because they are based on his direct experience of steady self-abidance. The hallmark of Ramana was his accessibility. His doors were always open, be it the old hall or the new hall or the nirvana room. The only thing he would insist upon was that none should be denied the opportunity of meeting him. As a result, there was a free flow of visitors, devotees, and serious seekers of truth. Their backgrounds, their earnestness, and spiritual evolution were different. Consequently, we have a wide variety of questions, a wide gamut of spiritual doubts, which Ramana has handled with authority and simple directness. It is open to all those concerned with truth, with the search for self-knowledge, to dwell on the meaning of his words, his statements, and his clarifications. They are like an open book from which one can derive strength and inspiration. There is no need for any special scriptural knowledge for understanding his teachings. However, it is absolutely necessary to ponder over and reflect on the guidance given. Such a need is there for any path, but it is more so in the Ramana way. I'll repeat that because he is giving us a condition. However, it is absolutely necessary to ponder over and reflect on the guidance given. Such a need is there for any path, but it is more so in Ramana way. Why? For it is bafflingly simple, seemingly without steps between practice and the goal. I'll repeat that. Why the author feels that we should do manana and internalize Bhagavan's teachings thoroughly and sincerely. Why? For it is bafflingly simple, seemingly without steps between practice and the goal. There is no system of do's and don'ts, no prescribed formulae. The nature of the experience, natural happiness, is the same during practice and what one is used to calling the ultimate experience. The difference being only that during the stage of practice, one keeps moving in and out of the state of blissful non-mental happiness. When the experience of the state is steady and undistracted, that itself is the goal. I'll read that because the author is saying that we should imbibe, meditate, and reflect on the teachings and then follow it thoroughly. However, it is absolutely necessary to ponder over and reflect on the guidance given. Such a need is there for any path, but it is more so in the Ramana way. Why? For it is bafflingly simple, seemingly without steps between practice and the goal. There is no system of do's and don'ts, no prescribed formulae. The nature of the experience, the natural happiness, is the same during practice and what one is used to calling as the ultimate experience. The difference being only that during the stage of practice, one keeps moving in and out of the state of blissful non-mental happiness. When the experience of the state is steady and undistracted, that itself is the goal. The means and the goal being the same is so alien to our dualistic thoughts. Hence, one has to go back time and again to Ramana's statements to understand their true meaning for practice. When it is a matter of unfoldment, of revelation, the progress is invisible and cannot be judged with reference to tangible and measurable yardsticks. Hence the great need for calm indwelling on the practical implications of Ramana's direct path for getting a proper insight into his teachings. Bhagavan, when somebody asks, why am I not able to see the progress? Bhagavan would ask them to continue. Because where is the question of thought of progress when the eye is stilled? It is that which is not born. So where is that which is not born and which is the Adhara for everything? How can that have progress? Ramana accepts all the traditional and spiritual methods. He would encourage people to continue their practice along the lines to which they were naturally inclined. If ritualistic worship is your cup of tea, fine. If you think action dedicated to God is your way, that too is fine. If your faith is in sacred syllables, by all means do go ahead. If your attraction is for Patanjali and his breath regulation method, it is quite all right. On the other hand, if you think that devotion to God is the way, do not give it up. Ramana would say that all these methods are purificatory. They would prepare one for self-enquiry, to which all seekers of truth have to come in the end. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We'll now have the practice of self-enquiry. It should be conducted by Sri Dileep Simha.
Namo Ramana. Dhyayet Sharada Chandra Sundaramukam Tambraravindekshana Bhaktabhishtavarabhayapradakaram Kaupinamathrojvalam Svatmanandarasanubhuti Sarvanavadyangakam Shrimantam Shri Ramaneshwaram Guruvaram Yogasanadhyasitam Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Dhyayet हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षातात्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जताव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्. We will commence the Atma Vichara by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham. I'll be reading from the book Guru Vachaka Kovai, topic from the chapter Meditation on the Truth. The topic is Gradations of Sadhana, verse 755. If rather than wasting his days, the jiva takes up the practice of vichara with firm resolve, his life will come to possess great excellence. The idea, I am this wretched body, will cease, and the sea of surpassing supreme bliss will surge abundantly within him. I repeat the verse. If rather than wasting his days, the jiva takes up the practice of vichara with firm resolve, his life will come to possess great excellence. The idea, I am this wretched body, will cease, and the sea of surpassing supreme bliss will surge abundantly within him. Bhagavan here is bringing our attention to that natural self which is ever present. As Nandakumarji beautifully read out from our founder president's article, there is no steps, no practice required. The self is clearly present. All we need to do is stop attending to the thoughts, to the ideas, which makes us feel otherwise and makes us feel very miserable, makes us go through innumerable emotions, and therefore as though the peace and happiness is not there. So for all of that, there is only one remedy, as Nandakumarji read out beautifully, is vichara, is to inquire to whom is this thought. And when we inquire to whom is this thought, we recognize that it is for me. And thereupon, when we inquire who am I, and turn our attention to the source of the I, then we see that the natural self is ever present. It was only the attention to the thoughts or the thought-based living that kept us away from that natural self. And therefore, Bhagavan advocates that all we need to do is only inquire. If we don't attend to the thoughts, then the natural self is always present. What happens in a way is like we sleep to the self and we keep waking to thoughts. But what Bhagavan asks us to do is wake up to the self and sleep to the thoughts. And that is the exact thing. So to the waking of the self is quite natural, as it was read out to us. It is ever shining, ever present, and there is no need to wake up. All we need to do is sleep to the thoughts. So the only thing that we need to do, if at all to be said, to be done, is if the attention is running behind a thought, we just have to bring it back and establish back into the self with the enquiry. The enquiry is only a means of not finding an answer, but becoming aware of the natural self that is present and the false running behind the thoughts. It is just to wake up from that and get back to this self. It's as simple as that. And by repeated practice, as A.R. Natarajan ji brings it to us, what is done with effort in practice becomes naturally that supreme bliss, naturally that silence, that which is natural to the self, becomes available at the midst of everything. And therefore, this is the most direct path that has been given to us, where the path establishes every moment in the goal, because the goal is the natural presence of the self. And the enquiry only removes the unnatural attention to thoughts, that which seemingly deludes us while it is not actually being real. And with this being our direct path given by Bhagavan for Atma Vichara, for the next 10 minutes, no matter how many thoughts come and whatever may be the nature of the thought, good, bad, ugly, or even spiritual, we should diligently know that we are attending to a thought and sleeping to the self. The only way we need to do is sleep to the thought. Therefore, we should inquire, to whom is this thought? And recognize it is for me, and thereupon, who am I? And wake to that natural awareness, to that natural ever-shining self, and not attend to the thoughts anymore. I repeated turning the attention back to the self. Bhagavan assures that in the practice, not only that we abide in the self, but in due course, that abidance becomes quite natural, and the bliss of the self, the expanse of the self, becomes automatically available to all of us. The immense grace of Bhagavan with which we have come to this most direct path. For the next 10 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara.
We will now have the sharing of Dakshinamurti Stotram by Sri Venkatesh Deshpande ji.
Oh. Sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviram karvavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Dakshinamurti Sarambham Shankaracharya Madhyama Ramanacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Oh. We're doing manana on the Dakshinamurti Stotram. So why are we doing manana on this? Basically knowing Paramatma as my Swarupa. That is the greatest benefit, and knowing which I'll be free from sorrow forever. So that is the problem with all of us is that we have sorrow, we have dukkha. Dukkha means why? Why we have dukkha? Because of the mind, because of our loitering mind. So Dakshinamurti, God in the form of the Guru with form, takes me to the formless. When I transcend form, I become fearless because I am deathless, and death is only for the form. So we will always start with the Dhyanam Shloka, and I request Sapna to kindly chant the Dhyana Shloka, please.
Yes, sir.
मौनव्याख्या प्रकटितः परब्रह्मतत्त्वं युवानम् वर्षिष्टान्ते वसदृशी गुणैः आवृतं ब्रह्मनिष्ठैः आचार्येन्द्रं करकलितचिन्मुद्रमानन्दमूर्तिं स्वात्मा रामं मुदितवदनं दक्षिणामूर्तिमीडे मौनव्याख्या प्रकटितः परब्रह्मतत्त्वं युवानम् वर्षिष्टान्ते वसदृशिगणैः आवृतं ब्रह्मनिष्ठैः आचार्येन्द्रं करकलितचिन्मुद्रमानन्दमूर्तिं स्वात्मा रामं मुदितवदनं दक्षिणामूर्तिमीडे. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sapna. I salute Sri Dakshinamurti, the young Guru, who teaches the knowledge of Brahman through silence, who is surrounded by disciples who are themselves rishis and scholars in the Vedas. I worship Sri Dakshinamurti, who is a teacher of teachers, whose hand is held in the sign of knowledge, Chinmudra, whose nature is fullness, who reveals in himself, and who is ever silent. So this is a beautiful, we went through some lectures before mine. I think the important thing that we really need to understand, everybody spoke about the direct path. So what do we mean by the direct path is something, let's do manana on this for 1 or 2 minutes. What do we mean by direct path? So we did 10 minutes of self-enquiry. So whenever a thought came, what happened? We inquired for whom is this thought, and we asked, who am I? So what was the path? Let us think about that. Is there a path or a destination? So when we said, who am I, were you going anywhere? Is the important thing. When the mind got quiet, what really happened? When you did self-inquiry, what really happened?
Your mind went quiet. Then what happened to the thought? Thought went off. Where were you? You were there in the now. So exactly the same thing that they say about the fish and the bird. Now the fish, can you trace back the path of a fish? You can't trace the path of a fish. Can you trace the path of a bird? You cannot trace the path of the bird. So exactly the same thing for us. Now, important thing that we need to understand is once you are in the now, every point in the path is also a destination. So we don't have to get anywhere. See, all the time in life, we are trying to get somewhere. We are trying to do something by which we'll get somewhere. But if you're in the now, then every point in the now, which we may call the direct path, every moment is also a destination. Like when you take a step forward, what happens? It is the path as well. When you put the foot down, it is the destination also. So once we understand that every moment of our lives is the path which is not visible, like we see the path of the fish and the bird, then what happens? We realize that every moment in our life is also the path and also the destination. So Bhagavan says, that's what he says, that actually there's no difference between yourself and the self. Both are the same thing. There's no separateness between these two. This is something we need to understand that. If you understand that, we are always being in the now. When we are in the now, where to go? If you say direct path, oh, there's a path, means there is a road, there is some place I need to go from here to there, but nowhere to go. When you went inside, was there something you had to go somewhere? You were in just silence. So that's very important. You are always in God, actually. It's whenever we forget that we are when we forget we are in God, that's when all these world and all these things come up. If you really are in quietness, if you are always in the now, the path, what we talk about, the direct path, the path and the destination is the same. So that is the importance of the Dakshinamurti Stotram. Dakshinamurti Stotram is what? Is nothing else but being in silence. Being in the silence means actually being in the now. In the now. We're always in the now. The trick about all sadhana is, that's why, we heard that it is so easy, but it's so difficult. That is the funny thing about realizing the self. That it is like that we read the Hastamalaka. It is like seeing a gooseberry on your hand. It is as simple as that. But we say, oh, it's so simple. Huh? No, this cannot be self-realization. It must be something very, very difficult, because we're used to, the mind makes you think that things are difficult. But we have to understand this particular point very, very clearly from the point that we say direct path, that the direct path is here and now. So now we continue to do manana on the, last time we started with letters from Ramanashramam. We continue to do manana on that, and subsequently we'll do manana on talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. So the attitude of silence is the letter number 136. I went to Bhagavan's Sannidhi presence at 3 o'clock this afternoon and joined the group of people around him in their discussions. Bhagavan casually remarked that Adi Shankara wrote Dakshinamurti Stotram in 3 parts and said Sri Shankara felt like singing in praise of Sri Dakshinamurti, but then Dakshinamurti being the embodiment of silence, the problem was how to describe silence. Now we went through 10 minutes of silence. Can you describe silence? If you are told to describe silence, it's impossible to do it. You can only be in silence. So that's what it says, that embodiment, the problem was how to describe silence. We therefore analyze the 3 attributes of silence. namely Srishti, creation, Sthiti, preservation, and Laya, dissolution, and the... Sorry, I'll just put this question on mute. Okay, put it on mute. Sorry about that. I know the child also was he loved the silence. So he therefore analyzed the three attributes of silence, namely Sthiti, Srishti, which is creation, Sthiti, which is preservation, and Laya, dissolution, and thus offered his salutations to Dakshinamurti. Dakshinamurti is the embodiment of these three attributes, which do not have any discernible characteristics or distinguishing marks. How else can silence be eulogized? Taking up the thread of the conversation, a devotee said, Dandapani Swami told us several years back that on a Mahashivratri day, devotees gathered around Bhagwan saying, Bhagwan must explain to us today the meaning of Dakshinamurti Ashtakam, the 8 slokas in praise of Dakshinamurti. Bhagwan, however, sat in silence, smiling. After waiting for some time, the devotees went away, feeling that by his continued silence, Bhagwan had taught them that silence alone was the true meaning of these shlokas. Is that a fact? Bhagwan, with a smile, yes, that is true. With some surprise, so that means Bhagwan gave a silent commentary. Bhagwan says, yes, it was a silent commentary. Another devotee says, Mauna means abiding in the self, isn't it? Bhagwan says, yes, that is so. Without abiding in the self, how could it be Mauna, silence? Devotee, that is just what I was asking. Would it be Mauna if one were to completely refrain from speech without at the same time having an awareness of the self and abiding therein? Bhagavan says, how could real Mauna be achieved? Some people say that they are observing Mauna by keeping their mouth shut, but at the same time they go on writing something or other on bits of paper or on a slate. Is that not another form of activity of the mind? So Bhagavan says very important. When we say keep quiet, when you tell a child keep quiet, what happens? It'll keep your mouth shut. It'll put your hands on your lips, keep your mouth shut. But the mind is running, continuously running. So Bhagavan says that is when you have to, it must be a total shutdown. There should be no activity happening. Another devotee said, is there then no benefit at all in refraining from speech? Bhagavan says, a person may refrain from speech in order to avoid the obstacles of the outer world, but he should not consider that to be an end in itself. True silence is really endless speech. There is no such thing as attaining it because it is always present. All you have to do is to remove the worldly cobwebs that enshroud it. There is no question of attaining it. So there's nothing attaining. That's why he said there's a direct path. There's no destination. If you say that there is a destination, then we are sadly mistaken because there is no destination in self-enquiry. It just be. You have to just be. Finally, you have to be in the silence. So we have to understand this very, very clearly in our minds. That's why when we ask, who am I, we are not expecting an answer. Because there's no fellow who's sitting inside and say, oh, yes, Venkatesh, you're asking, who am I? Don't worry, you're coming closer now to destination, coming closer. It's like the milestones from driving from here to Mysore. Oh, I have reached Ramnagaram, then I will reach Mathur, and then I will reach Mandya, and then Srinagarpatna, and then, oh, Mysore, now Mysore has come. Nothing like that is going to happen here. We have to just quieten ourselves and go within. That's why she says, all you have to do is to remove the worldly cobwebs, all the cobwebs which are distracting you, we have to remove that. There is no question of attaining it because you are that. It's that like that we say that, are you a human being? Yes, no. You are not a human being. Come on, all of us. Let us, 18, 20 of us, let's all do inquiry that we are human beings. Everybody laugh. What is this? We are all human beings. What are you saying, Venkatesh? Why should we do manana on human beings? We know we are human beings. Exactly the same thing. Each one of us is divine, but we don't accept it. We don't agree that we are divine. We are that Satchidananda Atman. We don't say, oh no, we can't be that divinity. We can't be. Our inside and God's Ramana's inside cannot be the same. He must be having something higher and bigger. It's like that. Like we did manana on existence. Like an elephant has bigger existence, and a human being has a smaller existence, and an ant has a very small existence. So the three levels of existence, a different existence. It's not that. It's all one. So if we understand that our real nature is that silence, and if we go within and truly understand who we really are, we don't have to go anywhere. There's nothing to attain. There is no question of attaining. That's what Bhagavan is saying. While we were thus engaged in discussion, someone said that a broadcasting company was thinking of recording Bhagavan's voice. Bhagavan laughed and said, "Oh, you don't say so. You don't say so. But my voice is silent, isn't it? How can they record silence? That which is silence. Why should they? Who could record it?" So this is a beautiful thing. There some recording company had come. He said, "How will they record? I am in silence. There is nothing to record." So the devotees sat quiet, exchanging glances, and there was absolute silence in the hall. Bhagwan, the embodiment of Dakshinamurti, sat in the attitude of silence, mauna, mudra, facing southwards. That living image, his body was radiant with the light of the self. Today is indeed a memorable day. So this is what was one of the letters that was spoken about, and it is beautiful to for us to understand this the great lesson for each one of us. What is the splendor of being in the self? The only trick really is to understand clearly there is no path, there's no destination. We are the self. And whatever we may do, we are always with God. We are always in God, because God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. God is to the left, to the right, top, down, everywhere is only God. Within there is God. There is only the Atman. So if you understand that and truly live in that, then we are in bliss, continuous bliss, and we become fearless and free, and then no dukkha can ever touch us. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the sharing of Devi Kalotra Jnana Vicharapadalam by Dr. Kalarani Rengasamy.
ஓம் நமோ பகவதே ஸ்ரீரமணாய. அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகத்தை வேறறுப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. Namo Ramana to all. With the abundance grace of Bhagavan, we are meditating on Devi Kalotra Jnana Vicharapadalam, very graciously given to us by Bhagavan in Tamil. And in the last satsang we saw, Niralogam Tane Ninai. Meditate on that Vastu, that Swarupa, which is beyond our vision, beyond our sight, which is beyond our thought. Even in Atma Satkaram, Bhagavan says, Sindai Saivai Dinamum Sindaiki Yettadadai. That which is beyond thought, meditate on that. The mind merges at its source at this state. In the next stanza, Bhagavan says, Subhavatil Yedu Balam Karmam Illai. The natural state, there is no karma, and naturally no fruits emerging out of it. Because when one dwells in the natural state, he finds no discrimination, as the mind will be merged at its source. Only with awakened mind, one feels happy, when something good happens. He is happy by accumulating wealth. He is happy when he is awarded or when he is honored. On the contrary, he feels sorrow when something happens which is not according to his own wish. He wants his son to become a doctor, but actually his son would have failed in +2. Expectations makes a man become sorrow. In the natural state, when the mind is at its source, there is no expectation at all. He may be with all qualities and leadership, but there will be no expectation. The best example is Hanuman, having a very great Sakti and all qualities to become a leader. He never wanted to become a leader. When he was with Sugriva, living in the mountain near Kishkinda, he happened to meet Rama Lakshmana. Just by looking at their face, he decided they will help his king Sugriva. Immediately he arranged for a meeting with them. Again, even when Rama wanted to cross and reach Lanka, he would take some time and effort to build Setu Bandhana. But Hanuman crossed it by flying. It's a quantum leap, as Sarada used to say. Over the ocean, just like that, he crossed it. How can a person with such great virtue be so submissive? That is because of total surrender to Rama. In that state, though he did all karma, he was nikarmana. He didn't do anything. Bhagwan used to perform his routine day-to-day work, but abide in the self always. Work performed in that state will be so perfect because mind is free of thought. In fact, there will be no mind at all where is the question of thought arise. When Bhagwan cuts vegetable in the kitchen ashram, it used to be so perfect. Moreover, in that state, there is no discrimination found. There was only samatva left out. Whatever food was there, that was equally shared in the presence of Bhagwan. If there is a small quantity of rice and additional devotees came, that rice would become kanji and will be served equally. In the peak summer, when Bhagwan was staying in Annamalai Hill, grass cutter ladies belonging to lower caste on their return would ask Bhagwan to pour some water for drinking. Without any hesitation, Bhagwan would not only give them water for drinking, he also poured some water on their back because it was so hot. Such will be the state of a jnani who always abide in the self. This is the same case with animals also in the ashram. Cow Lakshmi used to come round the ashram with no restriction. Sometimes she used to enter the kitchen garden of the ashram and eat the vegetables. When the person in charge of the garden complained about this matter, Bhagwan used to smile and say, if you don't want Lakshmi to enter the garden, you must keep it safe by protecting it and a lock and key. Bhagwan would never scold Lakshmi. Once there was difficulty in getting food for Lakshmi. So she was underfed and she was becoming thinner. Noticing this, in one lunch time, Bhagwan gave his lunch to Lakshmi. Seeing this, immediately arrangements were made to get more fodder to feed Lakshmi. Even squirrels, monkey, deer, dog, all had a very good time under Bhagwan's care. Bhagwan never accepts any special treatment. Once, Dr. Ramachandra Iyer came to ashram and gave tonic bottle and said, "It is good for health. Bhagwan, you are very weak. Please have this." Bhagwan said, "If that is good for me, it is good for all, isn't it? Is it possible for you to provide for all of us?" All assembled there said, "Bhagwan, we don't need it. You please have it." But that was shared equally, and Bhagwan accepted only one share out of that. This because Jnani have no concern over their body, because there is no body conscious at all. The root cause of all karma is the thought that I am this body. That is why in this stanza Bhagavan says, for a person who abide in the self, have no karma, and naturally there is no pala and no fruit. Subhavatil yed palam karmam il. Because when there is no viewership again, there is absolutely no need to experience the fruit out of that karma. Naturally, there arise no need to experience any sugha or dukkha. There will always be happiness. Only ananda will be prevailing in that state. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the sharing of Ramana Chatvarimshat by Sri Ujwal Jagadeesh.
Namo Ramana. We are meditating on the Ramana Chatvarimshat written by Ganapati Muni, and by the grace of Bhagavan, we are meditating on the 16th verse where Ganapati Muni sings Omkararthamupadisho Bhagavate Vani Manoharini. Omkararthamupadisho Bhagavate Vani Manoharini. Tatayapyupadeshu madhyatamabhut kinchitvadiyam mukam jeshtasyadya sahodarasya gurutam praptosidi gauravat subramanya kanishthitam apigata sarvadikatvam gunai. Ramanaya Loka Gurave Namaha. Ramanaya Loka Gurave Namaha. Omkara Dattava Upadeshi Devani Manoharanige. Tande Guyeno Upadeshi Salubayaside Ninna Suvadanade. ಅಗ್ರಜನಿಗೂ ಗುರುವಾಗುವ ಗೌರವ ನೀ ಪಡೆದಿಹೇ. ಸುಬ್ರಹ್ಮಣ್ಯನೇ ಕಿರಿಯನಾದರೂ ಗುಣಗಳಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಹಿರಿಯನೇ. ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ. ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ. Ganapati Muni in this verse says, in the last verse, he told, "O Ramana, different people seek your lotus feet. Some think you are a great yogi and they approach you. Some think you are a great jnani and they approach you. Some think of you as the compassionate one, as the sadhu, and they approach you. And few others approach you as guru, and they all worship your lotus feet. But very few, only 2 or 3 know your glory. Know your glory, that you have come for the good of the whole mankind, and you are the one who are ever abiding on the Pita Sthita, who is sitting on the Pita of the Mother Uma. And that Mother Uma is the very self, Chinmayi. And in this verse, he reveals who Ramana is. and tells us the story from Skanda Purana of Lord Muruga. How Lord Muruga became Guru to Brahma and his own father Shiva and to the whole world. The story begins with Shiva sends Muruga to Brahmaloka to learn the Vidya from Brahma, because Brahma is Vani Manoharini. He is the one who is the beloved of Vani, Saraswati, who is the goddess of Vidya, because he is the lord of that goddess of Vidya, Saraswati. He knows all the Vidyas. So Shiva thinks that is apt for Muruga to learn all the Vidyas from Brahma. And Brahma says, starts from the first letter, and Muruga says, I don't want to learn all these things. Teach me the highest. Tell me what is the true import of Omkara. Ramana himself says in Aksharamanamalai, Omkara Purul Oppuyar Villoi Unayar Arivar Arunachala. The import of Omkara, which cannot be understood. You are that, says Ramana to Arunachala, who is the self. And Brahma thinks that this little boy cannot understand that great import of Arunachala, which the great Jnanis itself find it difficult to express. So he does not tell the meaning of the Omkara. So Skanda, getting angry, he realizes that this Brahma is not fit for creation. So he arrests him and puts him in the prison, and he starts his creation, in which he creates Jnanis. Only Jnanis are born. The Jnanis who are fully aware, who are immortal, are born. And the earth becomes very, very heavy. And Mother Earth with all the Devatas approach Shiva for protection. And Shiva calls Muruga and says, Oh Muruga, why have you done this? And Muruga explains what had happened. And Shiva, surprised, asks, how can you do this to one who is elder to you? Do you know the meaning of Omkara? And Muruga confidently says, yes, I know. And Shiva says, will you tell me what is the meaning of Omkara? And Muruga replies, the meaning of Omkara can be told. The true import of the self can be revealed only by a guru to a shishya. So if you come to me and surrender to me as a shishya, then I can tell you the import of Omkara. At that moment, Shiva drops all his ego, although he is very embodiment of Omkara. For the world to know, a shishya should leave all the ego and surrender to the guru completely. At that moment, the guru reveals the true import of Omkara. The commentator says, he told the meaning of Omkara to Brahma, but we don't know what he actually told to his own father, because his father is very embodiment of Omkara. He is the very embodiment of the self. So we don't know. That's why the word used by Ganapati Muni is kinchit. Something he spoke to him in the ears of Shiva, that Subramanya you are, and now you have got the Gaurava, you have got the status of being the guru to your elder brother Ganapati. Referring to himself, Ganapati Muni, who is the embodiment, who is the incarnation of Ganapati, he says, now in this yuga, O Subramanya, although you are younger to all of us, you have got this merit of being called as the guru to all, including Brahma, Shiva himself. You are the Shiva Guru, and now you have got the merit of being the Guru to me, Ganapati Muni. They are very, very happy to remember this, because this is that auspicious month of November when Ganapati Muni was born. The very incarnation of Ganapati was born, and it was this very same month, during the time of Kartikai Deepam, in the hot Arunachala hill, Ganapati Muni ran to Virupaksha cave and recognized this Brahmana Swami who is shining here is not an ordinary human being, and fell at his feet, surrendering himself just like one surrenders to a guru. And he told, I have done all the tapasya, I have done Kotyanukoti Japa. I have understood all the Vedas and Shastras. Yet, I don't have the experience of the self. I don't have the experience of that Omkara which is shining within me. Please tell me the meaning of tapas, prayed Ganapati Muni and Ramana. That Brahmana Swami, the very embodiment of Subramanya Swarupa, with all compassion, spoke the first spoken Upadesha to Ganapati Muni. And he told, find out from where the I thought arises and merge at its source. That is true tapas. Find out from where the sound of the mantra emerges from within and merge at its source. That is true tapas. And Ganapati Muni, who had completely surrendered to that Brahmana Swami as the Guru, had the experience of the self, and he revealed to the whole world that this Brahmana Swami is no ordinary Swami. He is Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, and gave us this beautiful name, Ramana, which we can sing and dance and talk about. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. To this Ramana, to whom Ganapati Muni gave the name Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi, Vishwanatha Swami has written 108 names, which will be shared by Dr. Sarada, Ramana Ashtottara.
Namo Ramana, prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana, we are meditating on the wonder of that manifestation. And we have been listening to the teachings of Bhagavan as meditated upon by Sri R. Natarajan, and then again the teachings of Bhagavan embodied in the Dakshinamurti Stotram and in the Devika Lottaram. And just now we heard Ujwal Jagadeesh meditating upon Bhagavan as the Guru Swarupa, Skanda, the embodiment of the Guru Tattva. If we see Dakshinamurti as the Adi Guru, in the Tamil literature especially, Skanda, Subramanya, is the very embodiment of the Guru Tattva. So, Arunagirinathar says, Guruvai, Varuvai, Arulvai, Guhani. He is the embodiment of the Guru. And what does the Guru teach? The Guru teaches or shares his own experience. Be it Dakshinamurti simply sitting in silence and enveloping everyone in that silence, or Bhagavan himself, who is no other than that Dakshinamurti. It is an enveloping in his Anubhava. And in this Nama, Bhagavan's Nama, which is saying that Mahashakti Nipatena Prabuddhaya Namaha. Vishwanatha Swami is talking about that huge experience, that immense, that magnitude of that experience of the self, which is the simplest of the simple, as everyone says, but which is the vastest of the vast, which is of such magnitude that it cannot be comprehended by the mind. But one can merge into it by its very grace. So here, Vishwanatha Swami is talking about the descent of the power of the self. into that young boy, Venkataraman. Bhagavan says it is like a huge elephant entering a small hut, a tiny hut, and a mammoth, a huge tusker entering that hut. In a sense, that is how shaking it is to the identity. And what does Bhagavan do? He, as a young boy, when that Shakti descends on him, he surrenders to it. We have learned the beauty of surrender from Bhagavan right from when he went to Sahayamba and hid behind her as a boy of 5. And then later, in the simple incident, when he wanted more prasadam at Alagar Kovil, and he was given so much of prasadam. It was a surfeit, but he accepted it, saying, "This came from my desire." So he was always surrendered. And when this huge power decided to envelop him, having prepared him through the upsurge of love, through the reading of the Periya Puranam, through the memory of the glory of Arunachala, through recognizing that Arunachala can be attained here and now. Having recognized that and having read of all the glorious episodes of the lives of the Saivite saints, and what did each of these episodes show? It showed that they were ready to give up. Tyaga. Tyaga is the undercurrent of all the stories of the great ones in Periya Puranam. It is total renunciation. They are ready to give up their eyes, they are ready to give up their dear ones, they are ready to give up their very life. They are ready to give up their youth. It may be Karaikal Ammayar, who was ready to give up her youth. Kandappan was ready to give up his eyes. So each one, many of them would be ready to give up their lives at that moment when it is called for, or the ones who are dear to them. They are ready to put themselves on the scales, themselves, their possessions, their family, their dear ones, everything we will give to you. So that is the kind of renunciation that Bhagavan read about. Ready to give up everything. And the Vedas say, Tyagena yeke amritattva manushu na karmana na prajaya dhanena Tyagena yeke amritattva manushu. And what is to be dropped? What is dearest to us? It is our attachment to this body, which we take to be I. And when the Supreme came to Bhagavan and said, now I am going to take away this body of yours. I am going to take away the life force from this body of yours. The moment of death has come. That is how the Supreme came to Bhagavan at that moment, as the fear of death, intense fear of death. This body will go. And what did Bhagavan do? He decided to accept it. He decided to embrace that moment. He decided to embrace death. We constantly want to run away. We do not embrace even one moment of our lives. We are lost in thoughts of something which has happened earlier or something which may happen or come in the future. What is this moment? What is this moment? If we are ready to embrace that moment in all its fullness, one will get back to the self, because in this moment the self alone is. And Bhagavan did that. He embraced death, as it were, by deciding, okay, I will die now. I will act as if I am dead. Whatever is going to happen at death, I will willingly take it on. I will accept it. And he lay down and he stretched his limbs as though rigor mortis had set in. Says Bhagavan, made them tight, and he held his breath. We saw that he has already learned swimming. He had practiced swimming. He was an ace swimmer. And the core of swimming is holding the breath. So holding the breath was not a big deal for him. He held his breath. And there were no thoughts. There were no thoughts for him, because where was the mind for him who had Arunachala shining in him from his very inception, or when the moment of conception in Aragamma's womb, when Arunachala was shining in him gloriously all the time, there were thoughts. Bhagavan says later, I questioned, I made my body stiff, I held my breath, because I knew that I have a body, but I never thought of questioning my mind, because I never had a concept that I had a mind. To us, Bhagavan says, everything is in your mind. Question, get back to that. Do the tyaga of the mind through self-enquiry. But he, since there was no mind, even then there was no mind for Bhagavan, he simply inquired, this body is dead. It will be carried to the cremation grounds and burnt and reduced to ashes. A vivid picture. He has seen Sundaram Iyer's cremation. And he has known at that moment itself, the body will be burnt and reduced to ashes. And that vivid picture has come back to him, and he can see now the intensity, he says, of the fear of death. He says the intensity of the fear of death drove my mind inward. That is the intensity of that moment. All of us do think about death. We have fear in many forms. And every form of fear is, in a way, fear of death only. Fear itself is death. Death is fear. They are not two things apart. But what happens? The fear is not intense. And we always seek to escape it in some way or the other. But Bhagavan felt he could not escape it. So he accepted it and he faced it and he said, yes, the body is dead. And in that intense moment when the body is dead, he could feel the full current, the full force of the I, says Bhagavan. That Mahashakti, that he calls it, that huge current in which everything is included. The body is also included. It includes and transcends the body. And he was aware in a flash that that Mahashakti is the I. It is he. It is not something outside. It is not something inside. There is no division. That alone is, but in some mysterious way, everything exists in that, as that, but in that, can be experienced in that. And Bhagavan gives a beautiful example of the music, the Shruti note in music, the Adhara Shruti, which is constantly there. All other notes may come and go, says Bhagavan, but the attention was completely riveted on the self. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ram.
Namo Ramana. அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகத்தை வேறறுப்பாய் Arunachala. Bhagavan's heart had the spurana of Arunachala. Now we present that Arunachala Aksharamanamalai by Srimati V. Radha and Vallabh.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala. அருணாச்சலமென அகமே நினைப்பவர் அகத்தை வேற ரூபாய் அருணாச்சலா. அழகு சுந்தரம் போலகமும் நெய்யுமுற்று அபிநமாயிருப்போம் அருணாச்சலா. அகம்பூகும் தீர்க்கும் அககுகை சீரையான் அமர்வித்ததின் கொல் அருணாச்சலா. ஆரேக்காவென்னை ஆண்டனை அகற்றிடில் அகிலம் பழித்திடும் அருணாச்சலா. இப்பழி தப்புனையே நினைப்பித்தாயினி யார் விடுவார் அருணாச்சலா. ஈன்றிடும் மன்னையில் பெரிதருள் புரிவோய் இதுவோ உனதருள் அருணாச்சலா. உனையே மாற்றி ஓடாதுள்ளத்தின் மேல் உறுதியாயிருப்பாய் அருணாச்சலா. ஊர் சுற்றுடம்பிடாதுன்னை கண்டடங்கிட உன்னழகை காட்டருணாச்சலா. என்னை அழித்திப்போதென்னை கலவாவிடில் இதுவோ ஆண்மை அருணாச்சலா. ஏன் இந்த உறக்கம் என்னை பிறரிழுக்க இது உனக்கழகோ அருணாச்சலா. ஐம்புல கள்வர் அகத்தினில் புகும்போது அகத்தில் நீ இல்லையோ அருணாச்சலா. ஒருவனாம் உன்னை ஒழித்தவர் வருவார் உன் சூதே இது அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ, அருணாச்சல சிவ, அருணாச்சல சிவ, 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 அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ, அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சல சிவ, அருணாச்சலா. அருணாச்சலம் வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி. அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி. நமோ ரமணா.
Namo Ramana. We will conclude today's satsang with the Ashtottara Puja. The puja being held at Dileep Simha's altar. Puja is performed by Sri Dileep Simha. The Ashtottara Puja will be chanted. Ashtottara will be chanted by Vaibhav Ji and Prarthana and Uma and Ashwini.
नमो रमण. भारद्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितं श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तर शतनामावलिः अपार सच्चित् सुखवारिराशे यस्योर्विमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. ॐ महासेन वंशेन जाताय नमः. ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः. ॐ गुरवे नमः. ॐ अखण्ड संविदाकाराय नमः. ॐ महौजसे नमः. ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः. ॐ जगद्भिदावताराय नमः. ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः. ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः. ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः. ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः. ॐ सहायवते नमः ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः ॐ श्रीमद्द्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः ॐ तीव्राय नमः ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः ॐ तपोमयाय नमः ॐ उदासीनाय नमः ॐ महायोगिने नमः ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसम्ब्रह्माय नमः ॐ सुचन्द्रशे नमः ॐ सवित्रे नमः ॐ स्थिराय नमः ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः ॐ चूर्णिताशिलविभ्रमाय नमः ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः ॐ त्रिगुणात्मिकाय नमः ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः ॐ विराजतचलाकृतये नमः ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः ॐ पूर्णाय नमः ॐ अगचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः ॐ गम्भीराय नमः ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः ॐ दक्षिणास्य निभाय नमः ॐ धीराय नमः ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः ॐ स्वराजे नमः ॐ महर्षये नमः ॐ भगवते नमः ॐ ईड्याय नमः
ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः ॐ विमलाय नमः ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः ॐ आप्ताय नमः ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः ॐ समदृशे नमः ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः ॐ सत्याय नमः ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः ॐ श्री शोणाचलरुद्बोधस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः ॐ सौम्याय नमः ॐ आत्मवते नमः ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः ॐ महाभागाय नमः ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः ॐ विनताय नमः ॐ विनुताय नमः ॐ विप्राय नमः ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः ॐ दर्शनादकसंहारिणे नमः ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः ॐ रुच्चान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः ॐ स्मरणाद्बन्धमोचकाय नमः ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः ॐ शोणाद्रीशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः ॐ अभिच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः ॐ शुभ्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः ॐ गुहाय नमः ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः ॐ देवतमाय नमः ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः ॐ सेनान्ये नमः ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः।
ॐ श्रीरमण भगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनामपूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थाणोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्या जनिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः हृन्निष्ठस्वगभीरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संगीये नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानंद पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शी नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि। बोलो भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की जय।